there's no way that if you're watching martial art movies in today's age, you won't know about Corey Yuen and his work. I mean, if you don't know about his work, you're influenced by it, or
Sure.
somebody you like is influenced by it.
Ron, thanks for joining. It's always great to have you on the show.
Dave, thank you for having me on the show to talk about one of my favorite action directors and martial art filmmakers and legends.
Yes, of course, the late Corey Yuen, which is interesting because the news recently broke that he had passed away, but then we find out he actually passed away 2 years ago. Why do you think the family kept that a secret anyway?
I have no idea. I'm sure they had their own personal reasons for keeping him secret, but hey, at least we still get to celebrate his legacy, and whether we did it 2 years from now, 5 years from now, it's okay.
Yeah, and from what I've been reading and researching, I guess Jackie Chan's the one that mentioned it because I don't think anybody knew, and Jackie Chan had made a comment somewhere that he had passed away 2 years ago, which is interesting.
What the hell did you just say?
Okay, so Corey Yuen, I will always associate him with No Retreat, No Surrender. Of course, he also directed the second one, but he directed the first one, and that's such a classic martial arts film. His name comes up in conversation quite a bit. And now, after hearing about this news of him passing away, I researched him more and found out he was instrumental in so many films, a lot that I'm sure most of us have seen. Directed The Transporter, worked with Jason Statham a lot, worked with Jet Li a lot in Hong Kong. And then when Jet Li came to America, worked on Kiss of the Dragon, Lethal Weapon 4, Jet Li's first film in America. So even some early Cynthia Rothrock movies like Yes, Madam with Michelle Yeoh, just yeah, I had no idea because I've always just associated with him with the No Retreat, No Surrender guys. So tell us a little bit more about him. First question though, have you ever worked with him?
No, you know what? I've never worked with him. I've had the opportunity to meet him. One time I was in Hong Kong, and me and Mike Leader, we were walking through a Kowloon Park. And this guy's walking, very unassuming. He had a frumpy old hat on, smoking a cigarette. And Mike goes, "Hey, Ron, that's Jin Quay." I'm like, "What?" I mean, we spoke to him. And he just said, "Hey, what's up?" And, smoked a cigarette and walked on off. But it was just an amazing, just an amazing encounter. His work to me really defines martial arts cinema. I mean, he's kind of one of those people like Sammo Hung that he probably has an innovative movie almost in every decade since the martial art genre started. So his influence is everywhere. If you like Van Damme, you like Corey Yuen, you like Lauren Avedon, you like Jason Statham, you like Cynthia Rothrock, Donnie Yen, Cynthia Khan. His name is all over all of those people. So Conan Lee, you like Corey Yuen and his work. So he's just really one of the pillars of martial art action cinema as we know it today.
When were you first aware of him, as a director, as a fight choreographer? I've always heard the name from No Retreat, No Surrender, but
Right.
I wasn't really aware of him so much until I looked in his body of work. So obviously, I'm sure you've seen all these films before you found out that he was the guy that was instrumental in putting these specifically like the fighting sequences together.
I think I first became aware of his work when I saw Lauren Avedon in No Retreat, No Surrender 2. That movie always has a special place for me because before that time for me, I hadn't seen a lot of the Hong Kong stuff. I had seen like the older Kung Fu stuff. And no, I had seen some of the Hong Kong stuff, but to me, it just seemed like a remote, possibility. When I saw Lauren Avedon in No Retreat, No Surrender, I saw an American guy doing Hong Kong action in an American styled movie with American sensibilities. And I was like, wow, this is possible. Like this is possible. Not to say, Lauren was great for the role and everything, but to me, it grounded it. It was like, oh my God, they got an American doing this. It is possible. Maybe one day I can do it. So, and seeing the director was Corey Yuen, that kind of like was, in my head, I'm thinking, Maybe he's like some white guy or something like that, who's doing the action on this movie. Because I don't even think at that time I was familiar with the Yin Clan, Yin Wu Ping and the guys who worked under him.
Mhm.
So Corey Yuen is just to me, like I said, you're talking about fight choreographers, you're talking about Yin Wu Ping, Sammo Hung, Jackie Chan. Corey Yuen is right there beside those guys on the Mount Rushmore of action and martial arts cinema.
He's definitely been instrumental and had a lot of firsts. So, for example, that was Lauren Avedon's first film.
Kurt McKinney just got married, so they both didn't go. So then Mcian said, well, forget it, we'll just find new people. And he had Roy Horan again in LA. And Roy Horan called up Jun Chong's studio, and Lauren Avedon answered the phone. And basically they said, we're looking for a guy, 6 foot something, good looking, can do martial arts and act. And Lauren said, I'm the guy. And that was him. And with Matthias, I think they went down to Gold's Gym and they just said at the door, is there anybody European, very tall, very well built, who knows some martial arts? And then somebody pointed to Matthias.
And brilliantly choreographed. That was Matthias Hughes's first film, at least in the martial arts genre. And Matthias Hughes wasn't even a martial artist, but he came across as, a pretty competent martial artist. And even that was in the, one before that, No Retreat, No Surrender, the first one, Kurt McKinney's first film. Great martial arts in there. Jean-Claude Van Damme's, really, you could say his first feature film where he played the villain. And a lot of people wish they seen more of that style. That Van Damme did more of that Hong Kong style, of course, because obviously Corey Yuen was involved. But people wish they seen more of that style from Van Damme, and we only really got a taste of it in No Retreat, No Surrender, and a little bit later, I guess, in the mid '90s when a lot of the Hong Kong directors started coming to the United States. Van Damme actually worked with quite a few of them: John Woo, of course, Chow Hart, and Ringo Lam. But we never kind of got that Corey Yuen style out of Van Damme again. It was just once.
Right. Yeah, so Corey Yuen, he was actually probably the most prolific of the fight choreographers and Hong Kong filmmakers who used American talents in his movies, because he really came of age during like the modern action style, because he didn't like his first movie, which was with Conan Lee and Hiroyuki Sanada, was that first movie that he directed had those two guys. So that was like an old style movie. I think most of the movies that he did after that, that he was a director of, were modern day, aside from the Hong Si-yuk movies, were modern day action. So he was instrumental in framing how Westerners even look at because Sammo Hung was doing modern day action, but he was mostly using Asian people doing modern day action. Corey Yuen brought Sammo Hung and Corey Yuen brought Cynthia Rothrock over to do Yes, Madam, which had Michelle Yeoh and Cynthia Rothrock in it. And that's kind of like the one movie that really stood out to people like, wow, this is what, like Jackie Chan had been doing it and he had been, getting popularized for it. But the Yes, Madam is one of those definitive, when you look at that in fight scene, even today, it compares to anything you've ever seen. I want to read a list of just movies he was in. I'm not even talking about his work as a fight choreographer or a director. I'm just talking about he was just in the movies. Okay, so let me read some of these.
Because a lot of people don't even know he was an actor, but he was even in a Bruce Lee film. Right.
So the first time American audiences would have seen him was he was in Bruce Lee's Fist of Fury. He was one of the main heavies in the classic dojo fight. So that's the first time most people would have seen them. Most people probably wouldn't even have paid attention to who he was, but that's the first time they would have seen him. But then the movies that he was in, Fist of Fury, Hop Keto or Lady Kung Fu to people, The Man from Hong Kong, Bruce Lee and I, Seven Grandmasters, Magic Blade, Secret Rivals, Invincible Army, Soul Brothers of Kung Fu, Broken Oath, Born Invincible, Dance of the Drunk Mantis, Crystal Fist, Dragon Lord, Yes Madam, Millionaires Express, Righting Wrong, Eastern Condors, Three Against the World, Iceman Cometh, License to Steal, She Shoots Straight, Hong Si-yuk, Body of Beijing, and many other movies. Now, if he was just in those movies, he would be a major figure in martial art action film. If he was just in the movie.
For sure.
However, he went on to action direct and direct some of the seminal martial art action movies of the entire genre. Let's look at his work as an action director. Aces Go Places, No Retreat, No Surrender, No Retreat, No Surrender 2, Shanghai, Shanghai, American Shaolin, Fist of Fury 1991, a Stephen Chow movie, Moon Warriors, a great Sammo Hung film, New Legend of Shaolin, Jet Li, High Risk, Black Rose, The Twins Effect. I think Donnie Yen was in that. A Chinese Tall Story, Red Cliff, the John Woo epic movies that he made about 15 years ago. Man with the Iron Fist probably is his only dud on here. You know, the movie that the RZA directed, and I think David Batista was in. That's probably his only dud in this whole. Uh, uh, you got Badges of Fury, Birth of the Dragon. I mean, just so many classic movies that he wasn't even the director on. He action directed these movies. And like I said, he's one of the main architects that molded martial art action cinema as we know it right now. You know, if you look, J.J. Perry, who's directing Dave Bautista in movies, worked with Corey Yuen on a Shannon Lee movie where he and Benny Urquidez were the villains. It was called But Now You're Dead. The American title was Enter the Eagles. So J.J. Perry got to work directly under Corey Yuen, and now J.J. Perry is a director and action director and one of the top and most respected in Hollywood. Now he's taking Corey Yuen's legacy and advancing that forward. So that's just how important this guy was to martial art action movies.
Oh, for sure. And I really love the work that he did with Jet Li, specifically in America, because that was what I was more exposed to. Kiss of the Dragon is my all-time favorite Jet Li movie. No wire work or anything. That one's more realistic and visceral.
Yeah, I don't know if it's my favorite Jet Li movie, but it has one of my favorite Jet Li fights in it, which is that fight in the dojo. To me, is Jet Li's the equivalent of Bruce Lee's fight in Fist of Fury. That fight is only about 2.5 minutes long. It's so swift, so powerful. The techniques, the music, how it blends, how it flows. Jet Li is at his very just best. Oh man, I can watch that fight scene on loop. Like anytime I ever come across it on YouTube, I'll watch it like 5 times because every element about that fight scene is what I want to see and do in martial art action movies. Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And like I mentioned before, it's actually, of course he did incredible work with trained, skilled traditional martial artists, but just what he was able to do with guys like Jason Statham and Matthias Hughes, for example, in their first films, who didn't even have martial arts backgrounds, they come across like incredible. So it's just kind of like it's easy to work with, guys like you, for example, who have like a very diverse martial arts background, just your movements and style. It's easy to work with you, but the ability to work with, like I said, just the guy who's not a martial artist and make him look like a legit martial artist on film, that takes a lot of skill. Just kind of lets you know the level that he's at, that he could take these athletic guys but non-martial artists.
Yeah, and you know what else it takes? It actually takes, I mean, I've choreographed people who don't know martial arts, and to make them look like martial artists, you have to be able to tap in what they can naturally do well and accent that through the choreography. So Corey Yuen was excellent as that. It's like he identifies what people do well, he has an eye for it, and then he accentuates it, like Matthias Hughes. Perfect example. Just the way he had Matthias, like when he was fighting Lauren and he strut across the room and how he flexed his muscles. That's kind of like an indication of like Corey Yuen using, a natural asset that Matthias possessed to make him intimidating in fighting Lauren Avedon. So Corey Yuen, I would say out of all the choreographers, to me, he probably was the most. It's maybe Sammo Hung could rival him, but in terms of innovation, meaning that Sammo Hung has a style that he uses. Corey Yuen is always adapting his style, and you can see it in his movie. Like he'll use one thing I know is he does a lot of like Dutch angles and motion camera. he does that a lot. Like he'll follow like your arm or your hand if you're punching or a single move and stuff like that. So he was constantly like reinventing how he did his action. And a lot of people may not know there was another great martial artist who was his assistant. His name is Yen Tak, or his American name is Richard Hung. Uh, Fans of martial art movies might recognize him from a movie called The Master. There's a Shaw Brothers movie with Cheng Kwan Tai. That's a great Shaw Brothers movie. And he also was in another movie called Lover's Blades. And then he was also in Yes, My Young Auntie. He was one of the antagonists in My Young Auntie. He was the guy who was fighting Xiao Ho, the monkey fighter. So just the people that he worked around. He worked under Yin Wu-ping probably for more than a decade. Those seminal Jackie Chan movies. Snake. Snake Fist Fighter, or not Snake Fist Fighter, but Eagle and the Snake Shadow, and Drunken Master, and Dance of the Drunken Mantis. He was all a part of that until he went on his own to become a director. So, yeah.
What would you say is your favorite film, or maybe even have to give a few films that he was involved with?
Yeah, I actually wrote a list of just some of his work. Now, one thing was great about Corey Yuen is, as a fighter, he probably was more skilled than Jackie Chan. If you look at Dance of the Drunk Matters, Seven Grandmasters, and just a host of other films where he's his martial arts are on display, it is impeccable. His techniques, his flow, the way he moves, just how he controls his weapons. It's like if you think Jackie Chan was great, compare his work to Corey Yuen, and you'll go, "Wow, this guy might have been better than Jackie Chan." Just as that, but I guess he didn't want to be in front of the camera. So his genius, to his credit, what he did was he always played like an understated guy in movies. He would look like a dopey guy, he'd wear like funky clothes, smoke a cigarette, look like he's asleep or he's drunk, and he's probably one of the most brilliant martial artists who are working on the movie.
Well,
Get
it's funny,
down.
well, Ron, because he had mentioned that he
Yeah.
wasn't really interested in the acting component, but it's interesting to hear how
Yeah.
actually skilled he was.
Yeah, no, he's great. Like I said, look at Seven Grandmasters. Look at Dance of the Drunk Madness. Look at his technique. I mean, I'm talking about, for those of you who love shapes, Rodney Dennis, Corey Yin is one of the very best. I mean, you had people that you talk, Yin Yu, Jackie Chan, guys like that. He's right up there with them. Some of my personal favorites of his work, that we just talked about, which is Dance of the Drunk Masters and Seven Grandmasters, in which his martial arts skill is just impeccable. But then I love him in Eastern Condors because he was so goofy and he didn't even do anything. He's just running along looking pretty goofy. And Eastern Condors, to me, is Sammo Hung's kind of magnum opus. That movie, if somebody could remake that movie with some other cast, oh, it would just be great because Eastern Condors is great. No Retreat, No Surrender, No Retreat, No Surrender 2. Like I said, No Retreat, No Surrender 2 for me, I can remember when I first saw it, I just was like in awe of like, oh my God, this looks like an American movie, but the action is straight up Hong Kong. It
Mhm.
was like there was no, a lot of times when people have made the effort and it's not the Hong Kong style, you can see that lag in maybe technique or performance or pacing or rhythm. Not with No Retreat, No Surrender 2. To me, No Retreat, No Surrender 2 is the movie that just really stamps that. Like they did it in one, but one was almost kind of like a Hong Kong movie with American cast. This was a straight up American movie look. Like if you watch, No Retreat, No Surrender 2, it just looks like something like a Rambo derivative. It's just with amazing kung fu that's inventive and creative, and he was just an expert at that. So that's another movie of his I love. Another movie, American Shaolin, which I think is a very underrated martial art movie. It stars Cliff Linderman. American Shaolin is really the 36. It's like a reworking of the 36 Chamber, and kind of like a Karate Kid 36 Chamber. The Korean guy who was on Lost, he came from that movie,
Oh,
and
really?
that movie is just excellent. I think the story is just excellent telling of a martial arts tale. Oh, one of my favorite Korean movies is High Risk, where Jet Li. Have you ever seen this? It's the one where Jet Li uh, It's a diehard movie with Jet Li. Basically, Jet Li is a bodyguard protecting a fake Jackie Chan while he's making a movie and somebody's trying to kill him. The
Oh,
movie
that's
is
fun.
awesome. I mean, it's Jet Li at his best, and it's just great. A lot of fun and makes fun of like a lot of people in the Hong Kong industry. So yeah, let's see what's another one. Fong Si Yuk 2. Now, what's interesting in Fong Si Yuk 2 was he did both things. He played like a bumbling old, I think he was a wine cellar or something like that. And then when it was time to fight, his kung fu was amazing. I mean, it was go look up that fight scene where he fights in Fong Si 2. He is so smooth, so quick. The moves are just so accurate, and I was like, oh man, because he hadn't done any. I hadn't seen him do any martial arts in movies in over a decade, maybe longer. And when he got in that movie, Fong Si 2, his martial arts was on point. He looked as crisp as Jet Li, maybe even better. It was just amazing. So those are just some of the movies. Like I said, this guy's got a long, long history of just great martial art work. So to say, we could make this 10 hours and we're going to talk about all of his work, but he is really just one of those guys that is a definitive architect of modern martial art action cinema.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. And he really loved to have the creative control because he talked about in Hong Kong, the director basically calls all the shots. And on a Hong Kong
Mm-hmm.
production, you can basically, as you're filming it, because obviously you've worked on several films. I now have worked on several films too. And sometimes you just kind of come up with something on the fly that just might work better. Whereas like with the US, the bigger productions with the studios, usually got to get them involved. The producers in the studio makes the shots, and he had complained, oh, you have to have a meeting and it takes a week and you can't change anything and everything's just in stone and it's very frustrating. So having that freedom and that creative control, he really enjoyed in Hong Kong, and I think that's why these films were so great too, because it just kind of a testament to his genius of what he probably did just come up with on the fly sometimes, as they were filling out the different things and on location and all that. So you have a different energy there.
Yeah, yeah, that element is definitely built into their choreography. I mean, I'm kind of the same way myself. Is that I think there has to be some type of spontaneous combustion based on a rehearsal. Meaning, you have basically worked out what you would like to do, but what happens is when two people interact in front of the camera, a lot of times there's just unforeseen things that will happen that you won't ever catch again. And if you're smart enough to catch it and allow for it, you will get some amazing things. So there's a school to say, hey, let's rehearse every move 100 times till we have it how we want it. And then I think a lot of people from Hong Kong is kind of like, let's be a little bit more kind of like improvisation in jazz. We know what we're going to do, but let's allow for some things to happen as we're doing it, even though we're trying to stay on course. And he was like I say, he was a master of that, and I just love his work. And yeah.
Oh, for sure. Well, Ron, thanks so much for giving the tribute and talking about Corey Yuen's legacy. A lot of people may not necessarily know him by name, but I pretty much guarantee you the vast majority of people watching this have seen several of his films, have been entertained, and even inspired if they're martial artists themselves. So the man did a lot of great things for the martial arts cinema, and thanks so much for sharing his legacy with us, Ron.